So, we are discussing that how comes India has reached a position where 8% of GDP growth looks like a new normal, as it is being called. Let's try to understand how we have reached here, and then we take it forward.
So, growth has averaged about 8.3% in the last 3 years. And that makes India the fastest growing economy by a long way. Among the world's 20 largest economies, India is comfortably the fastest growing.
Last 8 years?
So, if you look at 8 of the last 10 years, India has been the fastest growing G20 economy. And those are the first 8 years in the last 77 years that India has been the fastest
So,
growing.
that obviously has to do something with this period, this government?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think it's important to understand that this government inherited a twin deficit crisis, a twin balance sheet crisis. Banks had terrible balance sheets, they were not in any position to lend. Corporates had awful balance sheets, they were incapable of borrowing. And under those circumstances, you also had inflation of 10%, average inflation of 10% for the previous 5 years. In fact, the month before the election, inflation was still 8.6%. Fascinatingly, since June 2014, inflation has never exceeded 7.6% in any month. I mean, it's remarkable.
Let's just explain the twin balance sheet crisis.
Yeah.
What it meant. It basically meant that the banks were in bad shape.
Yes.
And because they were in bad shape, they couldn't give money. And the corporates were in bad shape, so they couldn't take money because they couldn't do anything. And the reason was maybe governance, bad handling of economy, corruption, like we know those phone banking years were a different meaning of phone banking. Number one. Number two, the inflation front. Again, maybe the quantitative easing post the 2008 crisis, and then some bad steps, bad decisions, farm loan waivers, etc., contributed to that situation. So, what you are suggesting is that the Modi government, when it came in 2014, inherited a bad economy and turned it around, and that's why we have had 8 of the best of the last 10 years, which are also the 8 of the last 77 good years.
Yeah, I mean, in 77 years, essentially, there have been only 8 years in which India has been the world's fastest growing economy. Among the G20, the largest 20 economies in the world, India has been the fastest growing only in 8 of the last 77 years. And those 8 years are part of the last 10 years.
So, anyway, what the government would have done?
So, what they've done a lot. First of all, they started with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code.
Fantastic.
So, effectively creating a regime of creditor rights.
Right.
Now, if you look back, in fact, even during the Narasimha Rao years, the one lacuna was that you had very rapid bank credit growth. And as a result, you had a minor crisis in the banking system, and of course, you had the Harshad Mehta crisis as well.
Yes.
So, you had financial system wobbles during even the Narasimha Rao years, much less so, of course, than you had by about 2013. So, by 2013, you not only had a problematic financial sector, but the macro economy was also in trouble. And typically, what has always happened with periods of faster growth in India is that faster growth eventually leads to overheating. And 2 signs of overheating are very high inflation and current account deficits that are unsustainable.